I can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold.
A ruthless bounty hunter is almost completely ruth-free until a target turns out to be a cute green something that has all manner of special powers. Of course, its real gift is the ability to make you ignore all of your existing cute pets in favour of filling your house with baby Yoda toys. The Empire may be gone, but there's still a lot of business for talented bounty hunters, especially if you're the Mandalorian.
I thought you said it was built for adventure.
What? Sorry, I can't hear you!
The Mandalorian, created by Jon Favreau, was a live-action Star Wars television series that followed the adventures of a lone bounty hunter who picked up an unexpected sidekick. The series began as a smaller-scale adventure that followed a solo anti-hero plucked straight out of a spaghetti western, but would eventually become a sprawling space opera in the same vein as the movies that spawned it.
Stop touching things.
It was an early success for streaming platform Disney+, where The Mandalorian was the sort of show that would entice people to sign up for the service. And sign up they did, which is kind of the point for streaming services. 3 seasons were released between 2019 and 2023, with a 4th season being set aside in favour of a theatrical feature. The Mandalorian and Grogu, of course, was released after this video was posted. So today we're concentrating on the television series.
You're very special, kid.
It was initially an instant smash, but would see a major change in fan consensus after its 3rd season, which ended up very much like a difficult 3rd album where a death metal band goes disco. This is what led to my band Hellbucket breaking up. The fan reaction to Satan's hot moves on the dance floor was just too hard to deal with.
He was cut short in his prime by the Jedi forces.
The Mandalorian, for a time at least, was the type of Star Wars that a lot of people said they wanted. Something new, yet familiar, that didn't lean heavily on original trilogy characters. To begin with, there were no lightsabers or Jedi Knights, just a lone wolf who finds a family along the way. The series explores the galaxy as the Rebel Alliance turned into the New Republic. Chronologically, it's set a few years after the end of Return of the Jedi, but well before the sequel trilogy. One thing The Mandalorian did that the Star Wars movies to date hadn't done much of was to show more of the actual universe in a smaller scale, where every action wasn't necessarily linked to a major galaxy-spanning event.
Let me buy you a drink, Mando.
Sometimes you just go into a bar and it's not leading to the destruction of the Death Star.
Set right here. Let me see what's out there.
Mandalorian bounty hunter Din Djarin, voiced by Pedro Pascal, starts off as a badass loner chasing down various bounties, and he's made quite a name for himself. He was a foundling who wasn't a natural-born Mandalorian but would become one. To him, being Mandalorian is a creed, which means it's more than just chasing down people who owe money to the wrong people. Unless, of course, you consider that a noble profession along the lines of tow truck driver, human resources, or personal injury lawyer. Mandalorians wore armor made from Beskar, a super strong metal that resisted blaster fire. And, of course, it was only found on their homeworld of Mandalore. For them, finding more Beskar to be used in making armor was very important. In the past, the Mandalorians had fought many wars, both civil conflicts and major wars against the Jedi and the Empire. The Imperials more or less destroyed Mandalore.
You may fire when ready.
Leaving it a horrible place that was unable to support life, much like a cruise ship after a dysentery outbreak. The remnants of the Mandalorians are scattered throughout the galaxy. Some would hide in small coverts, while others would take work where they could find it. Now, I don't just mean they work the door at nightclubs or work as greeters at Walmart, but usually that meant working as a mercenary. The Empire may have fallen, but there are still random Imperial outposts and ex-Imperial personnel either trying to adapt to the new situation or are actively trying to return to the good old days of bullying the galaxy with Death Stars. A Mandalorian, who's not the only Mandalorian but in this story is the definite article, is given a job by the client to track down a bounty with sparse details, namely the target is 50 years old. This Mandalorian, sometimes known as Mando, discovers that he's not the only bounty hunter on this assignment, where he teams up with his rival, IG-11. The client is a middleman for ex-Imperials who want the target alive, but he also offers the choice of bringing in a dead target. When Mando and IG-11 find the target, it's a cute little green something. IG-11 chooses the dead option.
The asset was to be terminated.
Though Mando quickly realizes he's not as ruthless as he thought. Mando delivers the nameless green child to the client, but soon has second thoughts and instead rescues the child, which instantly makes him the target for other bounty hunters, including Greef Karga. His Mandalorian colleagues give up their safe house on Nevarro to help Mando and the kid escape to relative safety. Mando, with his new charge in tow, will embark on many adventures. Well, a few adventures, because the days of 20+ episode seasons are long gone.
Oh, what the hell? Come on.
The youngling is a mystery to all. Nobody knows who he is or where he came from, though everyone at home was cooing at Baby Yoda. The kid can't yet speak, is very willful, and ready to eat anything and everything. It also has some sort of powers that allow him to move objects with his mind. I mean, technically, I can move an object with my mind, where I can just look at some candy and I think about it, and before you know it, I've eaten the chocolate. Of course, I have to cheat and use my arm to move the chocolate from the display at the supermarket into my mouth without anybody seeing, but the principle is much the same. We will eventually learn the kid's name is Grogu, that he was being trained at the Jedi Temple at the time of Order 66, and so he's seen some shit. Mando now has a mission to keep the kid safe and return him to his people, whoever or whatever they might be. It's now been decades since the fall of the Jedi on Coruscant, and they've largely been forgotten about by much of the galaxy. They're like milkmen. They used to be everywhere, leaving milk on your doorstep and, with no linkage, fathering at least 3 kids from your first grade class. But now, thanks to supermarkets and Tinder, nothing.
You expect me to search the galaxy for the home of this creature and deliver it to a race of enemy sorcerers?
The structure of many Mandalorian episodes would often follow a pattern. Mando goes somewhere for a specific reason, but gets sidetracked, or he needs a favor from someone, but first he'll have to help somebody with their problems. For example, Mando goes somewhere remote to hide out, and then he's defending a village. Mando's looking to recover some Beskar armor, and then he's brokering an alliance between the Sand People and a small town who have to work together to take down a crate dragon. He'd make a few friends and supporters along the way, and then a lot of the time he'd have to look them up for help in the season finale.
Only you, Mando. Only you.
Carl Weathers as Greef Karga was originally a business associate on the planet of Nevarro, the show's first quest giver, who originally gives Mando the mission that kicks off the series. He'll briefly become an enemy before becoming one of Mando's most reliable friends. On Tatooine, Mando's ship, the Razor Crest, often needs repairs from Peli, played by Amy Sedaris, who's mostly trustworthy.
I don't even know who to complain to.
Well, 90%, so as long as you squint while looking at the invoices.
What's our next move?
There's Cara Dune, a rebel gunner as solid as a block of wood,
Sounds like a real piece of work.
played by Gina Carano, who also shares other qualities with the block of wood.
Looking for some work?
Retired Ugnaught Queel was voiced by Nick Nolte.
I have spoken.
Timothy Oliphant appeared as Cobb Vanth, someone who found Boba Fett's armor and became marshal of a small town on Tatooine. Bill Burr as the enemy-turned-useful ally Miggs Mayfeld involved Mando in a prison break, then tried to kill him, and then is later set free by helping Mando. Last I heard, Mayfeld is off playing gigs on the Death Star. I mean, they only spend a very small part of their time blowing up planets. Rosario Dawson appeared as Ahsoka Tano, Anakin Skywalker's former Padawan.
I've only known one other being like this. A wise Jedi master named Yoda.
And that's before all of the Mandalorians. I mean, there are so many Mandalorians.
This is the way.
There's the armorer, played by Emily Swallow, who's part blacksmith, part high priestess.
You are no longer Mandalorian.
Katee Sackhoff as Bo-Katan Kryze was a Mandalorian princess who wanted to restore Mandalore.
But Mandalorians are stronger together.
Paz Vizsla is Mando's office nemesis, often finding issue with Mando's actions.
Our world was shattered by the Empire, with whom this coward shares tables.
Assassin Fennec Shan, played by Ming Na Wen, was originally a killer with a price on her head and left for dead.
You look like you've just seen a ghost.
Before she was rescued by returning Temuera Morrison's Boba Fett, who isn't quite as dead as the Sarlacc social media team would have you believe.
I'm a simple man making his way through the galaxy.
There are various villains in the episodes, but the biggie is the ex-Imperial Moff Gideon, played by Giancarlo Esposito, somebody who pitches his big bad as somebody with no shades. He's just a bad one, played expertly by Esposito.
If you're asking if you can trust me, you cannot.
Gideon wants the child for his own research. He's the holder of the ancient Mandalorian weapon, the Darksaber, a weapon that can cut through almost anything. It's also the symbol of leadership for the Mandalorians.
I will create an army that will bring order to the galaxy.
The show has a lot of fun with guest actors, even if they're just voicing a character. People like Richard Ayoade, Taika Waititi, Lizzo, Jack Black, Christopher Lloyd, Clancy Brown, Horatio Sands, Titus Welliver, Jason Sudeikis, Katie O'Brien, Tim Meadows, Paul Sun-Hyung Lee, Werner Herzog, Omid Abtahi, John Leguizamo, Michael Biehn, Jar Jar Binks himself, Ahmed Best, and Mark Hamill. Sort of. The Mandalorians, or at least the covert that we meet at first, are very old school in how they act. They have many rules and rituals, not least that they can never take their helmet off in front of somebody else.
No living thing has seen me without my helmet since I swore the creed.
Now, of course, there are many jokes to be had at the expense of Mandalorians. Jokes about sweat and body odor and bad breath, why the armor always smells like cheese, the difficulties of using toothpicks, having to visit blind dentists, always having to use your passcode every time you want to read your messages on your phone, how karaoke is ruined by microphone feedback, how you can't pretend breadsticks are cigars, issues over hygiene and head colds, etc. But those are certainly not the types of jokes that I would make.
That's not saying much.
Some Mandalorian helmets have better features, obviously, since Bo-Katan can take off her helmet and it hasn't mussed up her hair at all, while every time Din Djarin takes off his helmet, he looks like he's just woken up after a month-long bender. When a Mandalorian from the covert needs to take their helmet off to eat or floss or sneeze or whatever, they will go off somewhere on their own and do it. And based on some of those jokes that we refuse to make, that's probably for the best. Pro tip, if you're ever invited to a Mandalorian's barbecue, make sure you either bring a dressing screen or smoke grenades.
I swear on my name and the names of the ancestors.
To me, the Mandalorian society takes a few cues from the over-the-top culture of the underworld in the John Wick movies, whereby the rules and rituals become progressively less practical the longer the series runs. Then of course there are other Mandalorians who have absolutely no problem taking off their helmets. When both groups join forces, there is a bit of a standoff between those who don't have to worry about accidentally swallowing flies while riding a bike, and those that do.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.
The Mandalorians not taking their helmets off is unusual in modern filmmaking. Most actors' performances come from their faces, their eyes and their expressions. Actors traditionally hate roles where they have to wear a mask. The first adaptation of a famously helmeted character, Judge Dredd, had to contend with a big Hollywood star like Sylvester Stallone, insisting that people wanted to see his face in a Judge Dredd movie.
Would you like to see my mask?
Superhero characters often wore masks, but once films and television series based on masked characters became big business, costume designers went to extraordinary lengths to create outfits that didn't completely obscure the actors' faces. And then Marvel eventually just gave up on having to find new ways to show actors' faces while wearing their iconic masks or helmets. Having them put on and then taken off was not ideal, and so we ended up with magical nanite bullshit appearing and disappearing masks and helmets.
I gotta get one of those.
But I suppose it makes a sort of sense. I mean, if you've paid Robert Downey Jr. that much cash, you do expect to see him. In The Mandalorian, they flat out didn't worry about that. Din Djarin does occasionally take off his helmet, but it's a really big deal when he does it, and it's something that he does not do at all lightly. Also, when his Mando pals find out, that's a big no-no and results in Mando being Bando.
I removed my helmet, and now I'm an apostate.
Early in production, it was realized that wearing big, heavy armor, even the relatively lightweight armor used in television, is really tough on the actors. So very quickly, the production evolved to lots of Mandalorians being played by doubles or stunt performers, unless their helmet was off. Eventually, Pascal would voice Mando and be on set whenever the helmet was off. Likewise, Jon Favreau voiced Paz Vizsla, but was never in the suit.
You are the leader of the war party. You have the honor of staying by the fire. This is the way.
Actors like Emily Swallow and Katee Sackhoff were in the suits. The process to make the suits evolved with body carts being made of actors in season 1, and later on the actors would just be 3D scanned, and then a perfectly fitted suit would arrive on set. You might be feeling shortchanged at the show's star not actually being on set most of the time. If you've ever spent time in a mascot suit, you'll know that it's a special type of hell. But again, if you haven't walked a mile in Mickey Mouse's sweat-filled shoes, then you won't understand. On the plus side, your leads wearing helmets 99% of the time does make recording ADR in post-production a piece of piss.
Grogu, come on, you can have it.
The show's other star, Grogu, was originally just written as a creature that was cute, but a little hard to control and prone to causing mischief.
It's not a toy.
Grogu is mostly realized through animatronic puppets, though some CG is used at times. So mostly puppet, some CG, but all adorable.
No, the red one. Show me the red wire. The red one.
The original intention was for Grogu to be mostly CG, but the puppet sculpt turned out so well that more and more puppet Grogu was used. Early episodes would shoot scenes with and without the puppet, until guest star Werner Herzog called the producers cowards.
Don't you agree?
The puppet was a favourite of the actors, not least because you could hold the critter and have something to react to during a take.
looks like it remembers me. How much do you want for it? Just kidding, but not really.
The puppet cost $5 million, so obviously we don't want to lose money. There were two main puppets, one for facial expressions and one for walking. For really complicated shots, CG was used, but with the edict that it had to look like the puppet. Many of the other creatures also have elaborate animatronic masks worn by actors, with CG often reserved for larger scale creatures or for something like a battle droid. Mando's spacecraft in the first two seasons, the Razor Crest, was unique for a 21st century production in that at least some of the time, what we see is a miniature model. Like a lot of things in The Mandalorian, working out how something was achieved will probably result in the wrong answer at least 50% of the time. Me, I just take a wild stab in the dark and I just guess. However, that is methodology that hasn't always served me well in the past, like the time I mistook a pre-ganglionic fiber for a post-ganglionic nerve and ended up losing quiz night on a Star Trek cruise.
I'm kidding. If that happened, we'd all be dead.
It's a miniature, it's CG, it's the volume, or it's a partially built set. The pre-Imperial Razor Crest was not a massive craft, nor was it the sleekest, where it's old and it's been through the wars. The design was based a little on the A10 Warthog, and in the show it's beaten up and repaired more often than the fenders on my 17-year-old nephew's Kia Picanto. For the show's third season, Mando had a new ride, a vintage N1 Starfighter that, like my vintage security camera that looks into my neighbour's pool area, has seen better days. It's a little tight in the cabin, and the restroom is an empty Gatorade bottle. But boy is it fast.
I like those odds.
I bet you do.
The Mandalorian did something very unusual for the time, and that was to streamline the storytelling to the bare essentials. It has very linear storytelling without a lot of dialogue, and characters are mostly upfront about their motivations. Some characters will develop, but the vast majority will stick to whatever your first impression of them was. With a few exceptions, they are very much a case of what you see is what you get. Some enemies will become friends or allies, but there are no characters in this that you started with a positive impression who will suddenly become a heel. Would that real life work this way? I remember starting a new job and started chatting to the dude who was in the next cubicle. He seemed cool and all. And then after a couple of weeks he started outlining his theories on why there are actually 25 hours in a day, and that missing hour, celebrity 8 o'clock, was when the aliens from Proxima Centauri pose as parakeets to peek into your poop chute.
I don't like this.
You always were paranoid.
Is that true, Mando? Were you always paranoid?
The influence of westerns is everywhere. You know who's who, you know who's a villain, you know who's an ally. Little dialogue and very easy to follow motivations.
I did what I had to.
Star Wars movies originally had pretty easy to follow plots, almost embarrassingly easy.
Not from a Jedi.
You didn't need a telescope to tell where the plot was going from a mile away. After the original Star Wars movie hit big in 1977, George Lucas put his vague plans for sequels into high gear. But in the meantime, to keep people thinking about Star Wars while he worked on The Empire Strikes Back, he signed off on a 1978 television special to keep audiences and toy buyers on the boil. Wow! The best received, or at least the least embarrassing part of the special, was an animated cartoon that would introduce the character of bounty hunter Boba Fett.
Boba, you're a hero and a faithful friend.
While it's never mentioned on screen, some supplementary media would fill in the details, naming Boba as a Mandalorian. People thought Boba Fett was cool. Even his limited appearances in The Empire Strikes Back reinforced that opinion, even though he just stood in the background and looked cool. And then, by Return of the Jedi, George Lucas had lost interest in the character and just killed him off, with Boba Fett never having come close to fulfilling the potential that had been imagined by fans. Some of his backstory had been outlined in Attack of the Clones, but that was really it. So for a while, Boba Fett was the coolest thing in Star Wars, and then nothing was ever really done on screen. Still, the idea of a Mandalorian bounty hunter was cool. So maybe one day somebody would do something with the idea. You know, one day. Yeah, perhaps. One day. After George Lucas had completed the prequel trilogy in the mid-2000s, he began work on multiple television projects in the Star Wars universe. There was the animated series The Clone Wars with Dave Filloni, and a live-action Star Wars television series tentatively titled Star Wars Underworld. This series, had it gone ahead, would have focused on Coruscant gangsters, but at the time, the series projected budgets were reaching new heights when Lucas had actually expected the series to be much cheaper to make. So Underworld was undone.
Yes, 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 yes.
Cut to 2017. Actor and writer Jon Favreau had evolved into a director who was always looking at how new technologies could be used in his films. He kicked off the Marvel Cinematic Universe with Iron Man, And it was while he was making his still animated but photorealistic-ish version of The Lion King that he met with Lucasfilm CEO Katee Kennedy and pitched a project about a lone Mandalorian in the vein of Clint Eastwood from the Man with No Name trilogy. Meanwhile, Dave Filloni, who'd shepherded many of Lucasfilm's animated Star Wars projects, also had ideas about Mandalorians, and so Kennedy put the two together to work on this new project. Filloni had been the supervising director on the 3D animated series The Clone Wars, under the watchful beard of George Lucas, and then later on Star Wars Rebels. Both series would touch on Mandalore and its inhabitants, and would introduce a few characters that would eventually turn up in The Mandalorian and its various spin-offs.
These events could all be connected.
Filoni and Favreau would be executive producers on the series. Each would write and direct installments, though Favreau would write the bulk of episodes. And the show would also attract various named directors. Robert Rodriguez and Peyton Reed, and actor Carl Weathers took on the acting job in the series in return for directing.
You got a runner. I'm on it.
As we'll soon see, The Mandalorian would require a lot more extensive pre-production than Star Wars projects of the past. For The Mandalorian, Doug Chiang and crew took Ralph McQuarrie's original Boba Fett designs and refined the look, and then did it again dozens of times for the multitude of Mandalorians.
Where is this going?
The Mandalorian would be filmed in Manhattan Beach Studios in California, now known as the MBS Media Campus, a studio complex built in the late 90s. The Mandalorian was going to be made in a way that utilized the latest technology, and that's where stagecraft enters from camera left. Wait, so is that my left or your left? Now, to avoid too much technical talk, we have a companion video to this, links in the description or up above, and that will look at the volume. But if you want to skip that, it's basically a big-ass video wall that's an alternative to green screen.
I've been quested to bring him to his kind. If I can locate other Mandalorians, they can help guide me.
In Season 2, Mando would learn a lot more about his little green friend, where Ahsoka would tell us his name.
Grogu?
Yes.
Mando would also meet other Mandalorians, led by Bo-Katan, and after a face-off with Moff Gideon, Mando would become the reluctant holder of the Dark Saber. He'd also lose his little green buddy when Grogu went off to be trained by Luke Skywalker. Or at least, well, not every effect has held up as well. As is common on Star Wars productions, there was secrecy. A development such as Luke showing up was such a tightly guarded secret that the cast scripts talked about Jedi Master Plo Koon showing up, and in such is the way of the world, Plo Koon fanboys, well both of them, were mightily annoyed when it turned out to be rotten old Luke Skywalker.
Thank you for letting me know. I'll get right on it.
Season 2 of The Mandalorian was often at times setting up spin-off series or potential spin-off series.
I'll put on a good show.
Not all of these made it to screen, but the first was The Book of Boba Fett, which was directly teased in the Season 2 finale. That series painfully demonstrated how you could spread yourself too thinly, where it tells a very odd tale of Boba Fett insisting that he's a crime boss, but actually he's more like the mayor of Mos Espa on Tatooine. And then for 2 episodes, it's The Mandalorian again, where Mando finds that the Darksaber is not all that healthy, and Grogu makes a choice. Basically, he does not want to be trained by Luke Skywalker and wants to travel with Mando. Season 2 was in production just as the first season debuted and would see an increase in scope.
See for yourself.
The first 2 seasons were notable for being smaller in scale. Most episodes were set in remote locations, small towns and settlements. Season 3 would see sprawling cities and large-scale epic battles. There's more emphasis on the other Mandalorians, with Bo-Katan now a series regular, and in most episodes will be Mando's offsider. Grogu will briefly get a sweet new ride, a hollowed out IG-11 to be used as an exoskeleton.
Stay close. Let's go.
The big thrust of Season 3 is the Mandalorians getting their shit together. The remnants of Mando's original covert seem to be living on the edge of a lake in some sort of haphazard training situation. And because Mando admitted to taking off his helmet, he was outcast by the other Mandalorians. The only way back into the club is to jump into the waters underneath the surface of Mandalore. But as that planet's been destroyed, that's clearly impossible. Until of course it isn't. Mando tries to get help from Bo-Katan, whose followers have deserted her since she didn't regain the Darksaber.
Your cult gave up on Mandalore long before the Purge.
She initially rebuffs him, but she will rescue him and then join with the other Mandalorians. An expedition made up of different factions looks to restore Mandalore, only to end up ensnared in a trap by Gideon, and Mando is taken prisoner. Which of course all leads up to a big battle where Moff Gideon has to reveal his plan in a monologue in the final episode, since there wasn't enough screen time to discover this in a less clunky way. Gideon's research into Grogu, leftover cloning technology, and Beskar has him making copies of himself with some force powers while he wears his own Beskar. And he's also got stormtroopers with their own Mando-adjacent Beskar armor. It's all for nothing since he's defeated, we hope, and his base destroyed. Bo-Katan and Mando are saved by Grogu, generating a literal force field.
The Din Djarin is accepting this foundling as his son.
For some people, and maybe even a lot of people, Season 3, well, the technical term is didn't bring it. I'm not necessarily one of those people, but I can see what rubbed a lot of them the wrong way. It's the scale and the lack of apparent focus, particularly on your first viewing. It can seem rather scattergun, and there's not necessarily enough of Mando and Grogu.
I've seen what you can do.
With Bo-Katan and the Mandalorians having reclaimed their homeworld, Mando offers his services to the New Republic to hunt down Imperials, while he and Grogu settle into their new homestead on Nevarro. With that, everything was set up for more adventures. At least that was the plan. A fourth season had been worked on, with Favreau having written scripts, but then it was decided that the next step for The Mandalorian and Grogu was a movie called The Mandalorian and Grogu. Didn't see that coming. Those fourth season scripts, or at least part of them, would form the basis of the 2026 film, but whether or not Mando returns to television or ends on the big screen, well, I haven't yet cast the runes, so I don't know. The music in The Mandalorian was kicked off by, at last count, 3-time Oscar winner Ludwig Göransson. Rather than ape John Williams' style, The Mandalorian has a musical score unlike any other Star Wars project before it. It's got a beat and the kids can dance to it, and that's just before it blasts off into a massive orchestral middle 8. Göransson would hand over much of the composing duties for Season 3 to Joseph Shirley. The action in The Mandalorian is done very well, and there is quite a bit of it. However, even with the use of stagecraft and the shorter runtimes of episodes, each episode still took a very long time to shoot, anywhere between 2 weeks to a month or even longer depending on the episode. When you make programs set in a galaxy where almost everything has to be designed, built, modelled or rendered, things are going to take just a little longer to cook.
Oh boy.
The Mandalorian is that Star Wars adventure that I wanted way back when I was young, back when there was only one film and a holiday special, some comic books and whatever adventure you made up with your action figures. The Mandalorian was originally pitched as a western in the vein of a late 60s spaghetti western, and honestly many episodes do feel like Jon Favreau and Dave Filloni playing with action figures while they were outlining stories. I don't mean that in a negative way at all. Some series cry out for nuance and depth, while others can work on a very surface level. The Mandalorian is definitely the latter, but it rarely feels too hollow or superficial thanks to its abundance of charm. There's sometimes a theatrical aloofness to some of the acting, but that's how you know this is a galaxy far, far away. We have a show with a lot of action and a lot of heart. Most of the supporting cast are enjoyable to watch. Pedro Pascal's deadpan growl is always controlled.
You're coming with us.
And Grogu is more adorable than a live stream of a puppy school at nap time. My own reaction when watching The Mandalorian was, oh yeah.
This is the way.
For a critical consensus, the show's mostly held up, but there's definitely a significant rump of fans and viewers who did sour on the show with the larger scale of the third season. But as we've seen many times over the last couple of decades, pleasing fans is very difficult.
I have been to the mines of Mandalore.
Impossible.
I've really enjoyed watching The Mandalorian. It's short and sweet and to the point. I mean, most episodes run between 30 and 40 minutes before a ridiculously long end credit sequence. The seasons are capped at 8 episodes, and it's a show that gets to the point faster than a very blunt bank robber who says it like it is just before getting shot in the back by a security guard, who's then haunted by the bank robber's ghost, and the pair become private detectives investigating sports doping cases in the world of professional badminton. So, you know how that line went on and on and on and went off on tangents? Well, Mando's the opposite. There are long stretches with little to no dialogue. And Mando himself is a man of few words, and Grogu is a being of no words.
It'll never get approved.
Which is why you won't tell them.
The Mandalorian. It's old school storytelling told in a new school way, with middle school not being remotely relevant to this analogy in any way. It shows that Star Wars can survive and thrive when it is not bound to the characters from the original trilogy. This is the way. If you enjoyed this review, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, or check out some of our other videos.